Hello, I'm Ryan.
Hello, I am Amy. Welcome to Listen to English Podcast.
Today, we're tackling a really intriguing concept.
Okay.
The idea that you can speak any language without, going through the traditional learning methods.
Right.
It might sound a bit out there.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
But trust me,
Mm-hmm.
it gets really interesting when we look at how babies learn language.
Oh, yeah. Babies are fascinating.
Right.
Yeah.
Think about it. Babies don't have textbooks
Nope.
or grammar drills.
No.
They just seem to absorb language naturally.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
How do they do it?
Well, studies show that babies learn by being completely immersed in language.
Immersed, okay.
Yeah, they're constantly hearing people talk around them, picking up on sounds patterns, rhythms. It's like their brains are sponges just soaking it all up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes you wonder if we as adults could learn more effectively if we, tapped back into that immersive way of learning.
Totally.
I mean, we all learned our native language that way.
Yeah, we did.
So-
It appears that we can actually reawaken that innate ability even later in life.
Really?
Yeah, it's all about creating an environment where we're surrounded by the language we want to learn.
Okay, but realistically, how can we do that?
Right.
Not all of us can just, pack our bags and move to a new country.
True. That's true.
Yeah.
But there are tons of ways to create immersion right where you are.
Okay.
Think about all the resources we have available now.
Like what?
Podcasts,
Okay.
movies, TV shows, music, even online communities.
Right.
All of these can be incredible tools for language learning.
So you're saying that even something as simple as listening to a podcast in another language can be beneficial?
Definitely.
Really?
You're exposing yourself to authentic pronunciation, natural conversation flow, everyday vocabulary.
Okay.
It's a fantastic way to train your ear to the sounds of the new language.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what about movies and TV shows?
Yeah.
I've heard people say that watching with subtitles can be helpful.
It can be, but there's a strategy to it.
Okay. Start with subtitles in your native language so you can follow the story.
Got it.
Then, as you become more familiar with the language, switch to subtitles in the language you're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, you might even be able to watch without subtitles altogether.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like a gradual progression towards fluency.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about actually speaking the language?
Right.
Listening is one thing, but how do we get to the point where we can confidently hold a conversation?
Well, studies show that imitating what we hear is a powerful way to develop speaking skills.
Okay.
Babies do this all the time.
Yeah.
They mimic sounds and words, even if they don't fully understand the meaning yet.
Right.
And we can apply that same principle as adults.
So you're suggesting that we should try to copy the phrases and expressions we hear in movies, podcasts, or even conversations.
Exactly.
Okay.
It might feel a bit silly at first,
Yeah.
but the more you practice, the more natural it will become.
And there's actually a technique called shadowing that can be really effective for this.
Shadowing, what's that?
It's basically listening to someone speak and then repeating what they say almost simultaneously. It's like a real-time echo. It might sound challenging, but it forces you to pay close attention to pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm.
I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
It's like active listening on steroids.
Right.
You're not just passively absorbing the sounds, you're actively trying to reproduce them.
Precisely.
Wow.
And the more you practice shadowing, the more your mouth muscles get used to forming the sounds of the new language.
Okay.
It's a fantastic way to improve your pronunciation and fluency.
Okay, so we've talked about listening and imitating.
Yeah.
But what about body language?
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like that plays a big role in communication,
Oh, for sure.
especially when you're first learning a language.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Studies show that over 50% of communication is nonverbal.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That much?
Our facial expressions, gestures, posture, tone of voice, they all convey meaning even without words.
So even if we don't know all the vocabulary yet,
Yeah.
we can still communicate effectively using body language.
Exactly.
Wow.
Imagine you're traveling in a foreign country and you need to ask for directions, but you don't know the language.
Right.
You can use gestures, facial expressions, even simple sounds to get your message across.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I've definitely been in situations where I've had to rely on nonverbal communication.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And it's amazing how much you can convey even without speaking a word.
It is, and it takes some of the pressure off having to speak perfectly. It encourages us to be more expressive and animated, which can actually make learning more fun and engaging.
So we've covered listening, imitating, and body language.
Yeah.
What's the final piece of this unconventional language learning puzzle?
Well, it's something that holds many people back from speaking a new language.
What's that?
The fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I know that fear all too well.
me too.
I'm always worried about sounding silly or getting things wrong.
Yeah.
That can be really intimidating.
It's a common fear, but it's important to remember that mistakes are an inevitable part of the learning process.
Right.
Think about how babies learn.
Yeah.
They make countless mistakes as they're babbling and experimenting with language, but their parents don't criticize them or get frustrated.
That's true.
Right.
They usually just smile and encourage them to keep trying.
Exactly. And that's the attitude we need to adopt towards ourselves when learning a new language.
Okay.
We need to be patient, kind, and understanding.
So instead of seeing mistakes as failures, we should view them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Precisely.
Okay.
And when we do make mistakes, we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help or clarification.
Right.
It's all part of the process.
It's like that saying, the only way to avoid making mistakes is to do nothing.
Right.
And in the case of language learning, doing nothing means staying silent, which prevents us from making any progress.
Exactly. The more we speak, the more mistakes we'll make, and the more we'll learn.
Okay.
It's a natural part of the journey.
So the key takeaway here is to just start speaking, even if we're not perfect.
Yes.
It's better to speak imperfectly than not to speak at all.
Absolutely. Perfection is not the goal here.
Right.
Well, one powerful technique we touched upon earlier is shadowing.
Right. That's where you listen to a speaker and then repeat what they say almost simultaneously.
Exactly. And it's a fantastic way to improve your pronunciation, intonation, and fluency.
Okay, but how do you actually do it effectively? Any tips for our listeners who might be new to shadowing?
Absolutely. First, choose audio or video material that's slightly above your current level.
So something that's challenging, but not completely overwhelming.
Precisely. You want to stretch yourself, but not feel completely lost.
Got it. What's next?
Next, listen to a short segment, maybe a sentence or two, without repeating.
So you're just getting a feel for the sounds and the rhythm.
Exactly. Then rewind and try to repeat the segment along with the speaker, mimicking their pronunciation and intonation as closely as possible.
Okay, so you're essentially becoming their echo.
Yes, precisely. Don't worry if you don't get it perfect on the first try. Just keep practicing and gradually increase the length of the segments you're shadowing.
And the more you practice, the more natural it will become.
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable, you can even try shadowing live conversations.
Ooh, that's a great idea. Like eavesdropping with a purpose.
Exactly. It's a fantastic way to immerse yourself in the language and pick up on real-world usage.
I love it. Now, what about resources? Any recommendations for finding good shadowing material?
Absolutely. There are tons of resources available online.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, you can find audio recordings of speeches, lectures, news broadcasts, even audiobooks.
Oh yeah, audiobooks would be great for practicing different accents and speaking styles.
Exactly. And many language learning apps and websites offer shadowing exercises specifically designed for learners.
Fantastic. So there's really no shortage of options.
Not at all. And the key is to find material that you enjoy and that motivates you to keep practicing.
That's so important. Learning should be fun, right?
Absolutely. Now let's move on to another powerful technique, mimicry.
Right. We talked about how babies learn by imitating the sounds and words they hear.
Exactly, and we can do the same, even as adults.
Okay, but how do we go about mimicking effectively? Any tips for our listeners?
Absolutely. First, identify native speakers you admire, whether it's actors, singers, podcasters, or even friends.
So people whose pronunciation and speaking style you'd like to emulate.
Precisely. Then, listen attentively to how they speak, paying attention to their pronunciation, intonation, rhythm, and even their use of pauses and fillers.
Okay, so you're really dissecting their speech patterns.
Yes, exactly. And then, try to imitate them, repeating phrases and expressions as closely as possible.
And it's okay to exaggerate at first, right?
Absolutely. It's like practicing a new dance move. You might feel a bit silly at first, but the more you practice, the smoother and more natural it will become.
That's a great analogy. Now, how about specific exercises for practicing mimicry?
Well, one effective exercise is to record yourself speaking and then compare it to a recording of a native speaker.
So you can hear the differences and identify areas for improvement.
Exactly. And another great exercise is to watch movies or TV shows in your target language and pause after each line of dialogue, repeating it out loud.
Ah, so you're essentially acting out the scenes.
Precisely. It's a fun and engaging way to practice pronunciation, intonation, and even body language.
I love that. It's like taking an acting class in a foreign language.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to another important aspect of communication, body language.
Right. We touched upon this earlier, emphasizing that it appears that over 50% of communication is nonverbal.
That's right. Our facial expressions, gestures, posture, tone of voice, they all convey meaning, even without words.
So how can we leverage body language to improve our communication skills in a foreign language?
Well, first, it's important to be aware of the cultural norms surrounding body language in the language you're learning.
Right, because what's considered polite or appropriate in one culture might be completely different in another.
Exactly. So do your research and learn about the common gestures, facial expressions, and physical space norms in the target culture.
Got it. Any other tips for using body language effectively?
Absolutely. One helpful tip is to observe native speakers and try to mirror their body language.
So you're essentially learning by imitation again.
Precisely. Pay attention to how they use their hands, their facial expressions, their posture.
And by mirroring their behavior, we can start to internalize those nonverbal cues.
Exactly. Another tip is to use your body language to emphasize your words and convey emotion.
So if you're excited, use more animated gestures and facial expressions.
Exactly. And if you're trying to be serious or convey empathy, adjust your body language accordingly.
That makes sense. Body language can really enhance the meaning and impact of our words.
Absolutely. It's like adding a whole new dimension to our communication.
Now let's talk about something that often holds people back from speaking a foreign language. The fear of making mistakes.
Ah, yes. The dreaded fear of sounding foolish or getting things wrong.
It's a common fear, but it can be paralyzing.
It can indeed. But it's important to remember that mistakes are an inevitable part of the learning process.
Easier said than done, though, right?
It can be, but think about how babies learn. They make countless mistakes as they're babbling and experimenting with language, but their parents don't criticize them or get frustrated.
That's true. They usually just smile and encourage them.
Exactly. And that's the attitude we need to adopt toward ourselves. We need to be patient, kind, and understanding.
So we should embrace our mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
Precisely. And when we do make mistakes, we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help or clarification.
It's all part of the process, right?
Absolutely. And the more we speak, the more mistakes we'll make, and the more we'll learn.
It's like that saying, the only way to avoid making mistakes is to do nothing.
Exactly. And in the case of language learning, doing nothing means staying silent, which prevents us from progressing.
So the key takeaway here is to just start speaking, even if we're not perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's better to speak imperfectly than not to speak at all.
I love that. It's such a liberating thought.
It is, and it's a reminder that language learning is a journey, not a destination.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today exploring these unconventional approaches to language learning.
We have, and it appears that there are some really powerful takeaways for our listeners.
Let's recap those key points, shall we?
Absolutely. So to speak a language without traditional learning methods, remember to listen first, like a baby. Immerse yourself in the language through podcasts, movies, music. Use shadowing to actively practice pronunciation. Copy what you hear. Imitate phrases and expressions to internalize the language. Embrace body language and emotion. Use nonverbal cues to communicate effectively, even if you don't know all the words. And finally, speak without worrying about mistakes. Be patient with yourself. View errors as opportunities to learn and just start speaking.
Wow, that's a fantastic summary. And I think one of the most enjoyable ways to learn is through music. Music has this incredible ability to connect with us emotionally and make things stick in our memory.
It appears that music is inherently engaging, emotional, and repetitive, which makes it a fantastic tool for language acquisition. Think about it. When you listen to a song you love, you naturally start to pick up the rhythm, the melody, and the lyrics.
And because music is often repetitive, you hear the same words and phrases over and over again, which helps reinforce them in your memory. It's like subconscious vocabulary building.
Exactly. And the emotional connection you have with music can actually enhance the learning process. When you feel something deeply, you're more likely to remember it. So if you're learning a new language, make it a point to listen to music in that language.
It's such a fun and effortless way to learn.
Yeah.
But how can we make the most of it? Any specific tips?
Definitely. Don't just passively listen. Sing along even if you don't know all the words. Look up the lyrics online so you can follow along and understand the meaning.
So it's all about active engagement. I love it. Now, what about movies and TV shows? I've always felt like they're a great way to immerse yourself in a language, but I'm sometimes overwhelmed by how fast people speak.
Movies and TV shows can be incredibly effective language learning tools, but there's a strategy to it. Start with subtitles in your native language so you can follow the plot and understand the context.
That makes sense. You want to enjoy the story without feeling lost.
Exactly. Then, as you get more comfortable with the language, switch to subtitles in the language you're learning. This helps you connect the written and spoken forms of the language.
And eventually the goal is to be able to watch without subtitles altogether, right?
That's the ultimate goal, yes. It's a challenging but rewarding experience when you can finally understand everything without any visual aids. But don't rush it. Enjoy the process.
Speaking of enjoying the process, I think games are another fun and engaging way to learn languages.
Absolutely. Games are designed to be interactive and challenging, which makes them perfect for language learning. There are tons of language learning apps and websites that offer gamified exercises.
Right, like vocabulary quizzes, grammar challenges, even virtual world simulations.
Exactly. And don't forget about traditional board games and card games. You can easily adapt games like Scrabble, Boggle, or Taboo to practice vocabulary and spelling in your target language.
It's all about finding creative ways to make learning fun and engaging. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more crucial point: consistency. We all know that consistency is key to success in any endeavor, and language learning is no exception.
It appears that even short bursts of practice done consistently can lead to significant progress over time. It's not about cramming for hours on end, but rather about making language learning a regular habit.
So it's better to study for 15 minutes every day than for 2 hours once a week.
Exactly. And the key is to find activities you enjoy and that fit into your daily routine. Learning shouldn't feel like a chore.
It should feel like a fun adventure. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this podcast, exploring unconventional approaches to language learning, from listening to music to embracing the power of games. It appears that there are so many ways to learn languages beyond the traditional methods, and the most important takeaway is to just start speaking.
Absolutely. Perfection is not the goal. It's about communication, connection, and expanding our horizons. So go forth and speak with confidence. Thanks for joining us on this incredible language learning journey, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.